Hi everyone, this is Dr. Christy Harder. I'm a naturopathic doctor and registered dietitian. I'm so excited to be here today. I am beyond over the moon to share this information with you guys. And over the next 4 days, we're really going to talk a lot about connecting to your foods and what that means and how to do it and why to do it and what it all entails. I have been doing this for a long time with patients, and I'm so excited to share with you guys. I have a brand new process. I have a brand new format. I've been doing this for so many years that it just has taken a lot of time to tweak and get the best recipes and figure out what works best with patients, how it can be as user-friendly as possible, and really just get people to find the foods that work for their diet the very best. So I'm super thrilled to have you guys here. I'm super happy I get to share with you all of this information. And this is my passion. This is something that I've been doing with patients for a really long time, and it's super fun for me to see everyone, after 2 weeks, generally they feel better. They feel like their bodies are working better, like they've been doing things better, like their energy's better. And it's so fun when people just can take those little tiny shifts and make it long term. So I'm super happy that you're here. If you guys don't know me, I am Christy Harder. I am a naturopathic doctor and a registered dietitian. I have been in practice in Santa Barbara for about 16 years now. I actually just took my practice in November all virtual because that's what I was doing in COVID anyway. So I see my patients on Zoom now, and it's working great. I wanted an opportunity to be able to bring this kind of program to more people and, not just have to be one-on-one in order to do so. So this is really a great opportunity for me to kind of reach out kind of farther than my Santa Barbara, my little Santa Barbara town. So when I was a naturopathic doctor, I was enthralled with everything that we were learning. And I also knew that I wanted to be able to not just supplement somebody with some vitamins and minerals and herbs and things when they were having a particular condition, but I also wanted to be able to look at someone's plate and be like, okay, like you might be deficient in this, or you might have an excess of that or that. And that's why I went on to get my master's in nutrition and be a registered dietitian, because I really think food is the foundation. I think that food is something that we can all make a choice about every single day. And if we make choices when our bodies feel really good, then we can carry that through and we can know what to eat, and we can actually learn what our bodies react to and learn what our bodies love. And it just all makes sense. And so I've been doing this program for a long time, and I named this series Connecting to Your Food, and I've had a lot of questions about it. So I actually think it's kind of funny because most people are like, what do you mean? Like, we connect to our food, like meet our farmers or go to the farmer's market or grow our own food? But it's actually a lot deeper than its inner work. It's not about connecting to your food, although I feel like anytime you can meet your farmers, anytime you can grow your own food, it's an amazing process. But this is about the energetics of food inside your body. It's about how your body uses food, how it absorbs food, whether it creates inflammation from food, and kind of what to do with that information on how we can best nourish and support all the systems of our bodies. Because we all know that it is horrible when you eat something and you don't feel well. We know the bloating and the gas and the heartburn that can happen when something doesn't feel good. You feel super full and you have no energy. Maybe you want to go to sleep after you have a meal, But also we should know how it feels when a food works really well. Like you have good energy, you don't feel overfull, you don't feel like, you know, your body is processing this huge thing that it doesn't really know what to do with. And so that is super important, I think, to remember, to be aware of. And part of this whole process and what I'll be talking about for today and the next 3 days is about just that, about how to figure out what works in your body and how to figure out what's reactive and what doesn't work in your body. We all have a particular mindset around food. And, you know, we think about mindset in more of a, I guess I want to say medical physical space where, you know, you have to have a mindset to have a good mood, or you have to have a particular mindset to achieve your goals in work, that kind of thing. But we have a mindset around food. It probably has been our mindset since we were a little child, unless, you know, we've worked at it. It's big because if we have a mindset that sabotages what we eat or how we eat or the timing of food, then that's going to interfere with how we eat. It's going to interfere with how our body uses that food. But what if we have a mindset where we believe that the food is our greatest nourishment, that we know exactly what we're going to eat and how we're going to eat it because those are the foods that our body feels best with, instead of having that, like, food is my enemy, or food is something that I have to avoid, or food is something that is a distraction or an inconvenience. Like, those are two really, really different views and perspectives of what you're putting into your body. And it really, it makes such a big difference on how your body works. So the program that I have, Whole Body Reset, that's coming out at the end of this week, we talk a lot about mindset. That's one of the biggest things that we talk about throughout the program is your mindset and how it works to help you, or how it works maybe negatively and to negatively impact you. And it's just a really big concept that I don't think gets talked about a lot. And I like to teach my patients about it because it does matter. It matters a lot. And the homework that I'm going to give you guys today is about how that feels, how an elimination might feel, and what that feels like in your system. So one of the reasons why I like this kind of elimination diet is because I don't like diets. I don't like dieting. It's hard to unravel when someone comes into my office that have been, you know, doing this program for a long time or that program for a long time. All of the different diets, the new trendy diets, the paleo or the keto or whatever it is. It's really hard to get someone out of that diet or dieting mentality, because diets don't actually work long term. They are not sustainable because you're taking out big food groups from your diet in order typically to lose weight or control your weight or balance your weight or whatever the goal is. But it's the dieting piece is hard to get people's minds unwrapped from. And I think this is kind of the antithesis of a diet, even though it's called an elimination diet. This is a short-term, we're going to figure out what works for you, and then you move on with the rest of your life, knowing what works, knowing what doesn't work, knowing what feels good, and that's kind of it. So it's about choices, it's about consistency. It is about intuition, although intuitive eating is a little bit of a concept that I like to talk about too, because after working with patients for so many years, I know that a lot of our intuitions around eating have been skewed. No matter whether it was the media that told us, or it was a friend that told us, or whether it was a parent that told us, or a magazine, our eating patterns have been influenced by something or someone out in the universe. And intuitive eating first starts with knowing how your body feels, when it feels well, when it doesn't feel well with particular foods. And so yes, it is, this concept is a little about intuitive eating, but I think resetting the intuition is more important, because finding the foods that work take a little bit of work, more than just feeling into how you're feeling intuitively. Because I've been doing this work for 2 decades. I've been doing the work myself for 3 decades. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. But I've been doing this work with patients for a long, long time. And I know that this process works. I know how good people feel when they go through this process. And it's a 4-step process. So I'm going to talk really quickly about the 4 steps, and then I'm going to go, today I'm going to talk about the very first step. So the very first step in the 4-step process is elimination. So basically we take the foods this time. So you could do this process with stress, you could do it with hormones. We're working on food. So you take certain foods out of the diet, the foods that are, typically hyperallergenic. You take those out of the diet for a limited time to decrease the body's exposure so that the immune system stops making so many antibodies to them. And then we challenge them. And that's the basic premise of the elimination. After the elimination, we start educating ourselves. And the education part takes two sets of people. So it takes the person going through the elimination, and it takes a partnership with someone who can teach you about your body, how it works, about your immune system, about the digestive system, how it works, kind of a little sciencey stuff behind it. And then it takes the person on the elimination to have ownership of what that means for them, to know all of the different variables that work, that don't work, to know the pinpoints of the things that don't make you feel great, and so that you can educate yourself around how that feels in your system and around what works and what doesn't. The most important step of it all is the experimentation. And a lot of patients get to the experimentation or the challenge phase and they're like, man, I feel really good, and there's just no way that I want to go back to how I was feeling. So I don't think that I'm going to do this piece of the process. And it's difficult to want to go back to feeling like you have no energy or you can't sleep or all of the different things, but it really is the most important part, because this is how you learn what works. So if you're eliminating, let's just take dairy, for example. If you're eliminating dairy for, a total of 2 to 4 weeks, and you're like, man, I feel great, not having gas, I'm not having bloating, my black circles under my eyes have disappeared. That's amazing and that's wonderful. But there's a whole big part of dairy. So what protein is it in dairy? Is it casein? Is it whey? Is it cow's milk? Is it sheep's milk? There's a whole lot of things that you can experiment with to see what works in your body and what doesn't work in your body, because everybody's different. And so when you do the experimentation, what's cool is you challenge a food for 1 day only. And if you feel badly from it, then you can choose whether or not you add it back into your diet. If it works, if you don't feel bad, then you add it back into your diet. So you're eating it 3-4 times a week, and you know that that's something that works for you, which is amazing. Now, if you challenge a food and you experiment with that food and it doesn't work, then you have the opportunity to make choices. So maybe you get a little tiny pimple on the side of your face, or maybe you get your fingers swell, and you decide that that food is worth it. That's what the experimentation phase does, is it helps you to make sure that it's either worth it or it's not worth it for you. And the 4th step is all about empowerment. It's about making those choices from what you learn from the experimentation, from what you learn about the education, from what you learn about the elimination. It's about empowering yourself to make choices that make you feel good for the rest of your life, so that you have the health that you want, so you're not a victim to your food, and food is fun. Food is something that you connect with in a way that you know really well. So I've been dealing with this my whole life. So ever since I was a very small child, I have had pretty extensive food allergies. When I used to eat chocolate ice cream, I would projectile vomit, and wasn't so fun for my parents who had to clean it up. And so of course they take me to the doctor and were told that I that I was allergic to chocolate. And there were no real like confines around eating chocolate or not eating chocolate or whatever, but I had to basically avoid chocolate, or else I would have this projectile vomiting. I had terrible constipation. I wouldn't go poo a lot. I had to have mineral oil, but I didn't really get that concept. I really didn't get what was happening until I was in my 20s and I was in graduate school and I had to do an elimination diet for a class, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But it's been going on for a really long time, so it's something that I'm very intimately familiar with. It's something that I have done with so many patients, and when I decided to do this program, it's easy because I have taught so many people how to do this, and I've helped so many people get from kind of their health here to, you know, their health here, that it's just kind of a no-brainer. So when I was in graduate school, we had our first nutrition class, and the instructor was like, oh, you know, we're going to do this elimination diet. I had never heard of an elimination diet before, but she explained it, everything about it, and for the next 8 months, I did an elimination diet, and like the purest form of an elimination diet, and it took me 8 months to challenge everything, and I learned more from that class, more from that opportunity, from that process than I had ever learned before about my food intake and about what worked and what didn't work. I've gone on to do several more eliminations because I wanted to kind of tweak things a little bit, but that started my kind of love for finding foods and figuring out how to connect foods the best. So a lot of people ask me about elimination, about why they would ever do an elimination diet, why they would ever like physically feel like that was a good idea. I had one of my really good friends just recently do an elimination diet, and so many people were asking, like, why would you ever do that? Like, do you have something really wrong with you? Is your health bad? Like what's wrong with you that you have to do this elimination? And her answer was just her truth, which was, I want to make sure that the food that I'm putting in my body optimizes my health. And that's what this is about. This is about making sure that you know the foods that work for you. And so if you have lower energy, if you don't have balanced hormones, if your digestion is off, maybe you have bloating, maybe you have gas, maybe sometimes you have looser poops, or sometimes they don't come at all. Maybe your sleep is off. You're having physical symptoms like swelling or aches or pains. That's a really great reason to eliminate foods and just see, you know, kind of what works and what comes up. You're resetting your immune system. So basically you're lowering your exposure to the proteins in certain foods. So let's take corn, for example. Corn isn't digested very easily for anybody, but for some people it is, you know, digested poorly, plus it creates inflammation. And so when you decrease that exposure and then you challenge the food, you actually give your body the ability to have this really true reaction, this really accurate response, so that your lowered inflammation allows you to know what you really would respond to when you eat that food from kind of a blank slate. Now, I said earlier, we're not doing an elimination or a food challenge in order to lose weight. That's not the goal of this program. It's not the goal of an elimination diet in my eyes. Now that does happen, and that's kind of a short-term thing that people can see. I've had many patients that have done the elimination and lost weight, but over the 4 weeks, it's common to lose the weight, but it's more about over a lifetime, knowing that eating the foods that work for you are going to balance and maintain and sustain a weight that's good for you. But it's also more about making sure that you don't have much inflammation from your food, that you have optimized your detoxification pathways, and that you know what foods are worth it and what foods don't work for you. So there's a lot of reasons of why we would do an elimination. I mean, I've had patients that have come in with infertility and thinking, oh, we're gonna do a big hormone reset or other things, and of course we look at hormones as well, but once you lower inflammation and once you get your body in a place where it's really efficiently absorbing minerals and vitamins from your food, your body knows what to do long term. Your body knows how to really reset and just keep things in balance all the time, which I think is pretty cool. So in the whole body reset program that I have, we eliminate food for 4 weeks. So the foods that we eliminate: sugar, alcohol, dairy, gluten and grains, soy, peanuts, nightshades, and corn. That seems like a whole lot of things to eliminate, but honestly, the recipes are really good, and most of my patients don't feel super deprived. You get 3 meals a day plus a snack or 2, depending on how many calories you need. But we're taking out the most allergenic foods from your diet, and also any food that you believe to be allergenic that you're not quite sure of. And that could be anything. Like maybe you eat eggs and sometimes your stomach feels a little funny, or maybe you have tomatoes and you get an itchy scalp. Whatever it might be, we would eliminate that food or those foods too, and add those kind of to the list of things that we're going to eliminate and challenge as well. So for elimination diets, typically you want to do a full elimination. You want to do kind of all of the foods that you don't react well to, plus foods that are super allergenic. And if you don't have the time, if you don't have the energy, if you don't have the bandwidth, if you've got too much stress, if your kids have too many activities going on, you can do one food for elimination at a time. And that's totally acceptable. It's still an elimination. It's still finding out what foods work and what foods don't. It's not as ideal because you're not kind of lowering the inflammation as much as you can, but it's something that can work effectively, especially for foods that you are really not sure about, and you're not 100% on whether or not you should eat them or not. That's something that can be really super helpful. And especially, I've had patients that have done, just kind of back to back, every 2 weeks, they eliminate another food and they challenge another food, eliminate another food and they challenge another food. And that has worked for them, because then over time you get to figure it out, and it doesn't have to be this whole, huge program that you do, or this whole thing that you do that is just kind of too much for a diet. So I get asked a lot about testing, about food allergy testing versus kind of a standard elimination diet. And I use food allergy testing a lot in my practice. I think that food allergy testing can be super, super helpful because it gives us a baseline. It gives us something to start with. There are really good tests out there There's some really not great tests out there as well. I will say that the finger prick tests that are on the market right now have not tested out to be super accurate by third-party testing. I don't use those in my practice. I use more of a blood test that checks for reactivity in the body from the immune system. Not all tests are equal, but they do really provide a foundation or a baseline for someone that doesn't maybe want to do just a full elimination with the most hypoallergenic foods, because sometimes it's not the most hyperallergenic foods that actually are causing difficulties. Sometimes it's the foods that you are exposing your body to the most that are causing reactivity, that are causing issues. And that can be an issue, especially if people who have digestive concerns, if people have any kind of reactivity, bloating or gas or energy fluctuations from the foods that they're eating. It's hard to want to eliminate foods that actually do work. And the testing, it really kind of narrows that down. So for anybody that is wanting to do an elimination, for anybody that is wanting to start from a foundation, I would say a food allergy test would be a good place to start if you feel like you're overexposing yourself, or if you're eating the same foods over and over and over again. That's a time when I would probably use a food allergy test rather than an elimination. For someone who has a limited diet, I would probably use a food allergy test rather than an elimination as well, just because you want variety in your diet and you want to be able to eat lots of different things in order to maintain all of the different proteins and fats and carbohydrates, as well as all of the different vitamins and minerals that are in the diet, the things that are super important, that are nourishing us and that are helping to build our cells, because that's ultimately why we eat. We eat because we want our bodies to build ourselves to get to a place where our cells are super healthy. The outer membrane needs really good fats in order to be able to have healthy cells that conduct really easily, that absorb things really easily. So you want to have that variety. And if you don't already have that variety, then I would say, and I tell my patients, that a food allergy test is probably the better way to go. Now, if you feel like you want to optimize health, you feel like you're not sure where to start, but you don't feel horrible, don't feel like maybe, there is some work to be done around your diet, around the foods that you're choosing, the foods that you're eating, you're not quite sure what to eat, a standard elimination diet, I feel like, is a better place to start. And I feel like that for two reasons. Because one, I've been through it. I know exactly what it feels like to know what foods work and for what foods that don't. And I feel like the process is more in depth. It's more acute to you. Now, a food allergy test, say you're not exposed to a food, say beets or something that you don't really particularly like, you can't get them locally easily, and so you don't eat them very often. So your immune system hasn't actually had big exposure to the beets. Well, in an elimination diet, you would not eliminate beets, because that would be a food that would typically be on a healthy dietary program. In a food allergy test, it would typically test for beets, but if you haven't been exposed to them often enough, or in the last 6 weeks from the test, then the test generally doesn't pick it up. but an elimination diet would. So if we are doing a standard elimination, we do 2 to 6 weeks of eliminating the most hyperallergenic foods, and then we start to challenge. And then once you start to challenge, if you have suspicions of foods that might not be working for you, then you can choose that to challenge as well. So you might, go 3 weeks and feel really great, and then you have a roasted beet salad, and like boom, all of a sudden you've got some kind of crazy symptom with bloating or gas, or you get an immediate headache. And then that's a pretty good indicator that that's something that you need to challenge, because that's a food that might not work for you on a daily basis. It might not work for you ever. And it would be really important for you to challenge that, because the essential piece of the program of elimination is figuring out what you need at the end of the day. So while I like both food allergy testing and the standard elimination, I feel like most people will gain more information from a standard elimination than from a food allergy test. But I use both, and I feel like both are good in different situations. So most people who do an elimination diet feel better after 2 weeks. And this isn't just the people that come in and have all kinds of complaints and, feel like their digestion is terrible, or they're feeling bad on multiple levels. This is people who come in and kind of feel pretty good, but want to just get to that next level of health. I feel like those are the patients that really get a lot out of elimination diets. People who are like, I feel pretty good, but I think I could feel better. I know that I can do things better in the diet. I know that I can, I felt better in my life at some point. So, I want to do some things that will help, to feel better. 9 times out of 10, when someone's coming in to optimize their health, I will do an elimination diet with them. Because if we do regular labs and their labs come back normal, and their, all of their blood tests are normal, and if we do any imaging, it's normal, then, typically, mainstream medicine would say, okay, well, you're great, so just, go on and keep doing what you're doing. But I know that food really matters. And just like I said, going back to when I wanted to do a nutrition program, I think that food is like the most essential, the most foundational piece of health. And the elimination is a way that even people with optimal health can take their health to a different place, take their health to a different level. And that's, kind of my whole practice is all about helping patients get to the very next level of their health, helping them to get more energy, feel like they can sleep better, feel like their hormones are balanced, all of the things that we want, all of the things that are incorporated into how we feel every day, wake up feeling really rested and having balanced moods, and all of those things, is our skin rashy, or do we break out in acne? Like, those things all matter. And if your labs look good and everything else is good, there's still something else to it. So the elimination diet for me is one of those things that can just take your health to a different level, can just allow you to figure out what works best for you. So I have some patient stories, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask questions. I've got my computer beside me so I can look at questions as well. But I have done the elimination diets for so many people. I have so many stories, and I have a couple that I want to share with you because they kind of just tell you the gamut of what I've used eliminations for. So I had parents come in with an infant. He was 6 months old and had been diagnosed with failure to thrive, which basically means he was not growing, he was not eating, and his weight and his height, just he wasn't growing to what he should have been. And they had tried every formula. Mom had tried a whole bunch of different dietary changes and restrictions. They could not for the life of them figure out what was going on as far as this projectile vomiting. Every single time he ate, he just threw it all up. And his doctors didn't have a lot of recommendations or a lot of advice. It was so super sad. And for this patient, I did, because an elimination diet would have been so super hard because formula is hard. It would have been hard for mom to do the whole elimination without having him continue with symptoms. So we did a food allergy test for him and then did the elimination based on the food allergy. And he was allergic to it came up with like 25 different foods, which is really pretty unusual for such a small child because their immune systems haven't been exposed to that many things. But they were things that weren't common. They weren't, eggs. They weren't gluten or corn or dairy. They weren't the really common things that you would think of somebody being really allergic to. And so it just wasn't on the radar for them to be out of the diet. And so they eliminated from mom's diet, from formulas, everything on that list. And within 1 week, this child that was totally projectile vomiting, was not eliminating, was not growing. 1 week, this child was not vomiting after any meals. And within 4 weeks, he had gained 5 pounds, which was a lot for this tiny being that was only 6 pounds at 6 months old. So that happened when I was first starting out in practice. And when I really realized that, gosh, it makes such a huge difference. And this child was in dire straits and it really helped. It really made such a big difference. So fast forward, I had been probably in practice for 5 or 6 years, and done many, many, many eliminations, many different diet with patients. I had a 13-year-old that came in. I had seen her parents, and she was an athlete, like a super amazing, great athlete. She played soccer, and she also ran track at the time. And she just didn't feel great after she ate some things. It wasn't, she wasn't having super huge concerns, but her stomach kind of got upset sometimes. She didn't have great energy sometimes. Sometimes her times for running were much less than others, which was not explainable by her training or by anything else that was going on. So we did an elimination diet, and I think I spoke to her parents like twice, after that. And it was kind of this total shift that happened. Her time, she went to state that year for track. Her run times were so significantly better. Her energy was better. She didn't have any digestive complaints whatsoever after she ate. She felt so good. So fast forward a year, I saw her. She was 14 at the time, and she totally looked like a different child. I mean, I know everybody changes between 13 and 14-year-olds, but totally looked different, had no acne, just looked so super healthy. She had stayed off all of the foods that had come up reactive for her when she did the challenge, and she was just this different, totally vibrant, super healthy child. And I actually just talked to her mom about a month ago, and she is in college now, and she's doing amazing. She's still avoiding the foods that came up reactive for her, and she's like a super rock star soccer player in college. And so that just makes me happy whenever I talk to people that have done this long term, and they know that it works for them, and they know that it's felt really good. So I also had a patient not too long ago, I would say 2 years ago, that came in, adult, female, in her 40s, and she just didn't feel well. She had Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid issue. And she had that pretty well controlled, and, you know, was feeling really pretty good with her thyroid medications and all the things. But she started having a lot of digestive issues and energy issues. She was having stress in life. And so there were a lot of different, you know, layers and pieces to the puzzle. So we decided to do an elimination. We had already done labs and done a whole lot of other kind of figuring out because of her autoimmune condition. So she does the elimination, and she's been a patient of mine for years and years and years. And so she does the elimination, and throughout the elimination, she just kept feeling like, okay, I can deal with my kids better, which was huge for her because with stress, she was finding that she was irritable and yelling at her kids, and it wasn't great for her. And she could handle stress just like piece by piece, just feel into it and not get so irritable. She had better energy than she's ever had before. She stopped having digestive issues. So she was waking up with bloating every single morning. And the more she ate, the more bloated she got. And so by the end of the day, she was like, I look and feel like I'm 6 months pregnant. And it was horrible for her. She was it just wasn't good. So anyway, so she gets to the end of it, and she's feeling super wonderful. And then she goes the opposite. Then she starts to have too much energy. Then she starts to get jitters. And I'm like, okay, well, we found the foods that work really well. She's feeling good digestively. Energy is good, but now too good. So we look at her thyroid labs, and now her thyroid, that she's always had to take a pretty high amount of thyroid supplementation, her thyroid's too high. Because we got her foods in check, everything was absorbing better, including her thyroid medications, including all of her supplements. So we had to significantly reduce the intake of her thyroid medications and her supplements, because now her body was working so much better on its own that she didn't need those things. She didn't need to put all of it in her body. And so it was like this super like, aha, like yay moment, because now she can choose the foods that work for her body, absorb all of her minerals, absorb the medications she has to take, absorb her supplements, and not have to take so much that her liver has to deal with and her detoxification process have to deal with. So that was a pretty significant thing that happened for her. And I've seen it with other patients. I've seen it with patients on other medications where we find out they're allergic to one thing or the other. And then they don't have to have those medications in large quantities. And so this process of eliminating foods and figuring out what works and what doesn't work is something that has changed so many patients' lives that I feel like everybody needs to know about it. I feel like everybody needs to experience it, because it does make such a huge difference. And you know, you can go online, you can Google comprehensive elimination diets, and you'll come up with so many different ways to do it. You can do it on your own, by just eliminating kind of the 8 or 10 most hyperallergenic foods, and you know, challenging them on their own. The way that I've written the program, it takes all the guesswork out of it. You have recipes, you have menu plans, you have grocery lists, which make it super easy and more convenient. But there's so many ways to do it. You can go get an elimination or a food allergy test. You can do an elimination online, but doing it works. It has changed people's lives in ways that not a lot of other things that I do or have done systematically works like this works. So I hope this gave you guys a little bit of information on an elimination diet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. But I have a little bit of homework, and I think it'll be fun and interesting to see what comes up for you guys with the homework. So I want to know how it would feel to do an elimination diet and find your foods. So I don't want you just to think about how you would feel, but I want you to actually feel like, okay, Christy Harder I've done an elimination diet for 4 weeks, fast forward me to 4 weeks, and how do I feel? Is my energy better? Is my digestion better? Are my headaches better? What's my very best? What are my goals? Like, what does my optimized health look like and feel like in my body? And write that down. Find how that feels for you and figure that out and write it down, but feel it, really feel it. And then I want you to also write down how many times a week you don't feel well. How many times a week you feel tired or achy, or you have digestive upset, or you have joint pain, you have swelling, you have a rash that comes up, you have other skin issues, acne, or anything like that. And how many times does that happen? And how many times do you wonder if that's from the food that you've been eating? So those are just some things to think about, some things to feel into, some things to really kind of get focused in on as we're talking about these eliminations, as we're talking about, you know, what to do to optimize health. It's super important that we know that it can make a big difference. And hopefully you guys will dive into the homework and just kind of feel into it. How would it feel? What would it be like? Google elimination diet, see what comes up for you. And tomorrow I will be back on here talking about more educational pieces. And the second step is education. So we'll be talking more about like sciencey stuff and how your digestion works and all of those fun things. So hope you guys enjoyed today. It was wonderful having you on. I appreciate all of you being here.